Well, we're happy you joined us today. We're looking in the book of Genesis, chapter 14, and watching some of the events happening in the life of Abraham. And one of those events, several of those events actually will wrap around his nephew Lot. In chapter 14, Lot is now moving into the places where he probably shouldn't be, as we're going to see later, in the land of Sodom. And as these little tribal kingdoms all over the place down there, they go to war against one another, and some kings swoop down and take off the leadership and a lot of stuff out of Sodom, including verse 12. They took Lot, Abram's nephew, and his possessions and departed, for he was living in Sodom. We saw last time he was moving towards Sodom as he left Abraham, but now he is actually living in Sodom, and he's starting to pay the price for that. So he's captured by these kings that are making war on Sodom, and he is in a bad shape. He's kidnapped. He's probably going to be killed and lose everything he had. But Abraham steps up. We find in verse 14, Abraham actually has a very large contingency of servants and so forth by now, 318 people working with him. Abraham's a very wealthy man. And he goes and he defeats these nations, these little tribal kingdoms, and he brings, verse 16, Lot back. And this is where it gets really interesting. As he comes back from the defeat of these kings, an individual comes out to greet him. Verse 18, his name is Melchizedek, and he's a king of Salem. He's also a priest of the Most High. He's come and brought to bring bread and wine. And he blessed him and said, "Blessed be Abraham," or Abram at this point, "of God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, and blessed be the God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand." And he gave a tenth of all to him. So we have this individual just kind of popping up out of nowhere. He's a priest of God, the Most High. He's also a king of the nation of the land of Salem, which would be eventually Jerusalem. And he comes out, he blesses Abraham, he brings him food. Abraham in turn blesses him and gives him a tenth of all the spoil that he had. So we have this guy named Melchizedek that shows up. He just kind of makes his cameo in chapter 14. And then we don't hear of Melchizedek again until Psalm 110. And in verse 1, we have a prophecy, so to speak, about Christ, that his priesthood would be after the order of Melchizedek. Now, this would be hundreds of years after this event that Abraham had. Abraham lived about the year 2000. And David, who probably wrote that psalm, lived about the year 1000. So we have a millennia where Melchizedek is never even mentioned. And then he's not mentioned again from that period until we get to the New Testament, another millennia or so. And now we find him in the book of Hebrews, and Christ's whole high priestly ministry is going to be modeled after the order of Melchizedek. Christ will be a priest after the order of Melchizedek and not Aaron. And that has very rich connotations for our own lives and what he's done. But it's interesting, and we've looked at that in the book of Hebrews together, but what's interesting is this individual who seems to be inconsequential, has no significance to us at all, becomes a centerpiece in God's redemptive program. We never can shortchange the plan of God and that which he wants to do. So that takes us through to the end of chapter 15. And after all these events, Abraham once again God comes to him once again, and this time to reiterate the Abrahamic covenant. And he does that here in chapter 15. And what is most significant here is verse 6. In verse 6, it says, "Then he believed in the Lord, and he reckoned it to him as righteousness." Well, what's interesting is Abraham has already followed the Lord into the land of Canaan. He's already been given the Abrahamic covenant. But apparently he is not yet redeemed. The Lord has not yet saved him, spiritually speaking. And then when we come to this verse 6, when he believed in the Lord, when he placed his faith in the Lord, it was counted to him as righteousness. Now, we could probably play around with this verse, but in the New Testament, it makes it very clear on three different occasions. Romans chapter 4, verse 3, James 2:23, Galatians 3:6, all three of those occasions quote this verse in reference to the salvation of Abraham. This is Abraham's conversion. This is when he came to the Lord. And he came to the Lord when he believed in the Lord. Not when he had done some good works, not when he simply stepped into the land, not when he built an altar. He is saved, he's redeemed when he believes in the Lord, and was counted to him as righteousness. Very, very interesting accounts that we have here. We'll pick up on some more verses on Abraham's life tomorrow.